Resourceful Designer, episode 186, Clarifying Your Brand Message.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He prefers his cars to be either black or white. Mark Dickow.
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you plugged me in your ears or turned me on your speaker. Whether you're at home, at the office, on your commute, out walking the dog, doing groceries, wherever you are, thank you for devoting a little bit of your time listening to me as we discuss growing our design businesses. Now, in this episode, I'm going to talk about narrowing down your brand message to make first contacts less painful. I'm also going to share a resource that can save your bacon should anything ever happen to your computer system, and finish with a question from Pauline about managing holidays. Now, what have I been up to lately? Well, I'm just finishing up a branding project. It's a really fun one. It's a logo that I created, but the client needed various incarnations of the logo. Now, it's a little bit hard to explain verbally, but basically needed different logos depending on the use. And I'm not talking about just a stacked version or a horizontal version. I'm talking about different aspects of the logo moving around or being eliminated altogether depending on the size of the logo or the intended use of the logo. So in some places, they might want everything, including the icon, the word mark, and the tagline. And in some cases, it would just be the word mark and the tagline. Some cases, it might just be the logo and the tagline. But even in those cases, the positioning on them would change depending on which logo was required. So it was a really fun project to work on. I'm just finishing it up. I've actually got the approval on the final thing, but there's a couple of little tweaks I want to do to the Illustrator file, some little points that don't quite line up perfectly. I was waiting for the approval. Now that I've got it, I'm just going to go touch those things up and then supply the logo to the client. So that was a really fun project to work on. I'm also just starting a website migration for a client. I'm taking on a new client. Right now, it's just maintenance on their website. I didn't design it. They just asked me to take over the backups and security and maintenance of their website. And in the process, I'm migrating it from their current host to SiteGround, which normally I would migrate it to my own SiteGround account, but they already had one. So I'm going to migrate it to theirs at their request. But this is a prelim to a redesign of this site, but that's not going to take place till probably sometime next year, as well as a secondary site for this same client that will probably get started in the next couple of months. And I'm also working on a new logo and a new website for an old friend of mine. He's pivoting his business. He's staying in the same industry, but he's kind of targeting a different part of the industry, and he wants to pivot. And in the process, he's changing the name of his business and some focus. So we're redoing the logo, redoing the website, and that one looks like it'll be a lot of fun as well. He's giving me a lot of leeway on how everything looks, and I love those clients that really let the designer do their job and come up with what the designer thinks is the perfect look for them. So those are really great clients to have. And this one, it's an old friend of mine. I'm doing it for him. And yes, I'm even offering him a little bit of a discount, but he is paying for it. I gave him a full price, but I said, I'll cut you a little slack just because we're old buddies. So that's just a little bit of what I've been up to lately. Now, before I share this week's resource of the week, I want to take a moment to talk to you about the Resourceful Designer community. It was actually brought to my attention that I don't talk about the community enough. And this wasn't from a community member. It was from somebody else that knows me really well. And when I mentioned something about the community, they says, "What community?" And when I told them about it, they says, "I didn't know you had this." They says, "Why don't you talk about this on your podcast more often?" So because of that conversation, I thought, yeah, he's right. I don't talk about it enough. So if you're not sure what the Resourceful Designer community is, it's a paid group of designers. We interact over Slack. There's a Slack group that we have with multiple channels in it. And we have conversations about everything involving our design business. It could be about pricing, client acquisition, web design. We post work for critique. We discuss tools and resources that we use. And that's just a part of the community. Now, you may think, well, that sounds just like the Facebook group, Mark. The difference is because this is a paid community, you know these people are really dedicated to growing their business. And what's happening is the members are really getting to know each other. We're interacting, we're getting to know each other's businesses. And that means that whenever we're asked for help, we can give a much better opinion, much better advice, because we're getting to know these people and we know what they're capable of or what they shouldn't be doing, and we can direct them much easier. Now, another thing with the community is the monthly video chat. And with this, we all get on to our video chats and we discuss all sorts of topics. Last month's topic was continued education. We talked about learning. And this month, it looks like the topic's going to be hiring help, anywhere from contractors to virtual assistant, and just how to vet people. Now, this isn't necessarily me leading a group. This is just a group of designers getting together and discussing what we know on a certain topic to help others that may need a little bit of help. Now, the community consists of designers who are just starting out, as well as veteran designers with a wide range of experiences. So if you're working by yourself from home and you've got nobody to really share things with or to talk with, and you're looking for a dedicated group of designers to be your peers and possibly even become friends, then why don't you check out the Resourceful Designer community by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/community. And a quick shout out to Nico, our newest member. Thanks for joining. And now, this week's Resource of the Week. Now, this week's resource is something I've shared with you in the past, and it's Backblaze. But before you skip ahead and think, oh, I already know about Backblaze, hold on a second, because there's some stuff that I didn't even know. I've been with Backblaze for years now, and I just went today because I wanted to double check the price before I announced Backblaze as my Resource of the Week, and I realized that there is a lot of stuff that Backblaze does now that I wasn't even aware of. Now, in case you're not familiar with what Backblaze is backup software for your computer. It works on both Mac and PC. You can consider it a cloud-based backup, but what it is you set it up and you forget about it. This is not like Dropbox that you're constantly going in, dropping, putting files, taking files out. Backblaze is a set it up and forget about it, and it will constantly back up your computer. As you create new files, it'll back them up to the cloud. Now, the purpose for this is in case anything ever happens to your computer. You know you have a complete backup available to you. Now, the great thing about Backblaze is you can re-download anything that you lose, or to make it even easier, you can have them ship you a hard drive, a physical hard drive in the mail that'll make it a lot easier to restore a system. So if your computer gets damaged or stolen and you have to reset up a new computer, they will send you a hard drive. And if you return the hard drive within, I forget what the period is, there's a certain time frame, if you return it, then they will refund you the full amount. So that's just an extra service. Now, a couple of things that I did not know Backblaze does is Backblaze can actually act as, I'll say time machine, although time machine, that's associated with Apple. Really what it is version history. So unlike working with Dropbox or any of these other platforms, Google Drive and that, when you save a file to it, it's overwriting your existing file. With Backblaze, you're not actually working directly on their server or anything like that. What it does is it monitors your computer. When a file has been updated, it makes a new backup of it, meaning it's a new backup. So the old version of the file is still there. So you can go back in your version history, similar to Time Machine on a Mac computer. You can go back through your version history and retrieve an old copy of a file. So if you made some changes and you say, I really needed the old one, these changes were no good, you can go back in and say, okay, I want to get the copy from yesterday, from last week, from 2 weeks ago. Now, this version history is available to all Backblaze users for the past 30 days. It's included in your fee. So automatically, you have the last 30 days worth of all your files are available in the backup. Now, if you want beyond 30 days, there is a $2 a month charge, and they will hold them for a full year. And if you want them for, they say forever, so more than a year's worth of backups, so that you can say, I want this file that I created 3 years ago, I want that version. That's still $2 a month plus half a cent for every gigabyte per month of your older files. Now, if you do the math, that's $5 a month for 1 terabyte of information. Now, the great thing is you can actually go through there and say, here's some files I don't need. Like if this client doesn't exist anymore, why keep the files for them for forever? Delete those files off the backup because you don't need them anymore. The client doesn't exist anymore. So save hard drive space that way. But this is a service I didn't even know they had. Now, another service they have is a map your computer, which means if your computer is stolen, and this is great for people with laptops, if your computer is stolen or misplaced, they can help find your computer through identifying both the IP address, wherever the next time the computer hooks up to an internet somewhere, It can identify the IP address where it is. And if it connects through an internet somewhere, it can also connect or identify the internet service provider that is being used. And they will coordinate directly with the police on your behalf to help find your stolen computer or missing computer. So this version history and this map your computer function, I didn't even know the Backblaze offered these. It wasn't until I went to look at the price that I discovered it. Now, speaking of price, Backblaze is available for as little as $55 a year. Now, that's if you sign up for a 2-year plan, it's $110 for 2 year, or it's $60 a year if you just want to do it on a yearly basis. You can do it monthly for $6 a month, but if you're going to do it, you might as well do it for the long haul and get in for a year or more. So really, for all that peace of mind, for $60 or $55 a year, it's well worth it. As I said, I've been with Backblaze for years, and they've never failed me. Now, if you are interested, I do have an affiliate link. If you visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Backblaze, that will redirect you. And yes, I will make a small commission on the sale if you decide to purchase. So that's the resource of the week. And now, clarifying your brand message. Has this ever happened to you? You meet somebody for the very first time, and during the conversation, they ask you, "What do you do for a living?" Innocent question, hear it all the time. So you reply that you're a graphic designer, or you're a web designer, or you're a UX designer, or whatever form of design you identify as. And when you answer, one of two things usually happens. The person you're talking to says something like, "Oh, that's great," and then they immediately change the subject because you've already lost their interest. Or maybe they do show a little bit more interest and ask you to explain more. Perked by the inquiry, you stumble through your repertoire that you design logos and you design websites and posters and brochures and t-shirts and trade show booths, etc., etc., etc. And pretty soon, the person you're talking to is nodding their head, smiling with a glassy-eyed expression, clearly indicating that they've completely regret asking you that question. And that's the problem with our industry. Most people have heard of designers, but unless they've actually dealt with one of us before, they really have no idea what it is we do. And when they do find out, they quickly realize that they don't care. Saying you're a graphic designer or a web designer is not the same as saying you're a firefighter or you're an electrician or you're a dentist or you're an accountant. All of these professions have a distinct image already ingrained in people's heads. Sure, there are many different types of, let's say, accountants, but regardless of what branch of the accounting industry someone works in, most people understand that an accountant spends their day working with numbers. I mean, what else is there to know about accounting? Now, I apologize if you are an accountant and you're listening to this podcast, but it's the facts. Regardless of where you do your accounting or what branch of accounting you work in, most people pretty well have a good idea of what you do. You work with numbers. But when it comes to designers, most people don't really care when you tell them what it is you do. And the reason behind this is because normally you're not clarifying your brand message when it comes to presenting yourself. Now, the proper way to respond when somebody asks you, "What do you do for a living?" is not to talk about yourself and what you do. No, you should instead be talking about your ideal client and how you solve problems for them. Now, let me give you a little bit of a backstory on why I chose this topic today. I subscribe to Medium.com. Now, if you're not familiar with Medium, it's an online repository, I guess you can call it, of articles that span just about any topic you can think of. Anybody can write an article and publish it to Medium. I've done so myself on several occasions. Now, every day, I get a digest email listing articles that may be of interest to me. I've set up certain topics that I'm interested in, and Medium will send me an email with articles published under those topics. Now, the other day, I saw an article called "Stop Calling Yourself a Freelancer." Now, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know that I really don't like the term freelancer. I find it demeans what we do as designers. The connotation behind the term freelancer is someone who's flighty or doesn't take what they do seriously. I am not a freelancer. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. And the business I chose is design. Now, if you want to know more about how I think of the term freelancer, go back and listen to episode 17 of the podcast, which is titled "Being a Freelance Graphic Designer Could Hurt Your Business," and listen to how a designer friend of mine lost out on a great opportunity for a job because she called herself a freelancer on her resume. Now, you can get that episode by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 17. So, of course, when this Medium article caught my eye, I immediately clicked over to read it. Now, the article, once again, is titled Stop Calling Yourself a Freelancer and is written by Andrew Holliday of Special Sauce Branding. Isn't that a cool name? Special Sauce Branding. I love it. Anyways, I'll include a link to his article in the show notes for this episode in case you're interested in reading it. And I do suggest you go read it because it's a really good article. And you'll be able to find that in the show notes for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 186. Now, while reading through Andrew's article, I found myself agreeing with everything he was saying about the way people perceive freelancers as commodities that are interchangeable. As I said, you really should go read the article. But then there was one part of his article that jumped out at me. It was a section called Clarify Your Message. And as I read this, I immediately thought, I need to do a podcast episode about this. Now, of course, I don't want to plagiarize somebody else's work, so I reached out to Andrew and asked, is it okay for me to borrow this article and use it as the basis for a podcast? And Andrew graciously agreed. Now, in his article, Andrew states that the easiest way to clarify your brand message, one that connects with your ideal client and doesn't just sound like spewed bladder about yourself, is to write a script and memorize it. Now, that may seem daunting to some, but it's actually quite easy to write a brand script. All you have to do is complete the following 4 sentences. Sentence number 1, my client is blank. Sentence number 2, they struggle with blank. Question number 3, I help them by blank. And finally, question number 4, the one thing that makes me different is blank. And that's it. By completing those 4 simple sentences, you'll have a script that provides structure for your business, for your brand, and for all your marketing material for your design business. This new script of yours identifies your ideal client, it defines their problem, it solidifies your solution, and it states why you are the perfect designer for them. For example, as you may or may not know, earlier this year, I started a side business to my design business where I specialize in branding for podcasters. You can actually look at the website. It's at podcastbranding.co. Now, if I go through these 4 sentences myself, they would read something like this. 1, my client is someone who wants their podcast to be noticed. 2, they struggle with consistency when it comes to their brand imagery. 3, I help them by creating a cohesive visual identity for their podcasts that can be used across all platforms. And 4, the one thing that makes me different is I'm a designer who understands the podcasting space and how to get noticed amongst the growing number of podcasts. That's my script. That's my brand message. Now, you may be thinking, Mark, you're not going to say all that when someone asks you, what do you do for a living? And yeah, you'd be right. I wouldn't say all that. It's definitely overkill. But what this script does do is it clarifies my brand message for me. But when it comes to the what do you do for a living question, you need to simplify your script down to a single sentence. And as Andrew put it in his article, this is your brand one-liner. Now, the brand one-liner is something that you'll be able to use on your website, on your social media accounts, in your marketing material, and in every conversation you have where you talk about what you do, especially when someone asks, what do you do for a living? So how do you shorten your script down to a single one-line sentence? Like this. You look at what you composed for your 4-line script and you break it down to this one sentence. I help blank to blank. And that's it. In my case, with my podcast branding side business, when someone asks me what I do for a living, I can now reply with, I'm a graphic and web designer. I help podcasters to visually stand out and get more listeners for their show. That's my branding one-liner. And it's a conversation starter that's sure to pique someone's interest, especially if that person I'm talking to is either interested or knows someone interested in podcasting. They don't need to know that I create logos, I create podcast cover art, I create social media images, I can create lead magnets and ebooks and all that sort of stuff. What people need to know is I help podcasters to visually stand out and get more listeners for their show. That's much more compelling. Now, if you want to try this to come up with your own brand script, Andrew, who wrote the article, has a worksheet that will help you craft your own brand script, and I'll include a link to it in the show notes for this episode, or you can get to it by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/brandscript, and that'll redirect you to his site. Now, just so you know, you will have to enter your email address to download it. That's what I did, and I think it's a nice and easy way to create your own brand script. And once you have your brand one-liner figured out and memorized, you won't be stumbling over an answer the next time someone asks you, "What do you do for a living?" Now, I would love to know, do you already have a brand one-liner? Or are you planning on using the idea from this episode to create one? If so, please share your one-liner in the comments for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 186. And now, this week's question of the week. This week's question comes in from Pauline. And Pauline wrote, how do you manage holidays or vacations, both in terms of responding to initial inquiries and or making progress on current projects? Well, thank you for your question, Pauline. And I've found that the easiest way to do this is be upfront. If I want to take holidays or vacations, I let clients know. If it's somebody contacting me for the first time, I will let them know that I will be away from this date to this date. If it's an ongoing project or an existing client, I will let them know either on the onset of the project, if I know I'm going to be working on something for a month or 2 months, and I know that I'm taking vacation in there, I would let them know up front. And if it's something that maybe was taking a little bit longer time than expected and vacation is creeping up, I would notify them in advance that, by the way, between these dates and these dates, I will not be available. I will be on vacation. And in all my experience, I've never had a lashback from a client because of this. I mean, they'd understand that you work for yourself and you've got to take vacation just like they do. And usually if there's a project that will involve a deadline, most of the time you already know about your vacations and you can take them into consideration and let them know. So don't be afraid to let a client know that you won't be available. Now, one thing I do recommend, Pauline, and I've mentioned this a long time ago on the podcast, is I don't really like to tell people that I'm going on vacation. I simply tell them that I will be out of the office or the office will be closed on such and such a date, and then let them figure out what that means. Because I work from home, I don't like to announce the fact that I will be away. And if you say you're on vacation, normally that means that the house will be vacant. And it's just asking for trouble, letting somebody know that the house will be vacant for a week. So by just simply saying that you'll be away from the office, they don't know if the house will be vacant. Maybe that means that I'm at a conference or something else is up, but not necessarily everybody from the household will be gone. So it's just one little thing I say. I never tell my clients when I'm going on vacation. I just let them know that the office will be closed on such and such a date. So that's all there is to it. Just be honest with your clients. Make sure you take that time into consideration whenever you're giving quotes or timelines. If you know that you're taking a week off or a couple of weeks off or even just a long weekend off, let them know. For example, I'm in Canada, and at the time I'm recording this, Monday that's coming up is our Thanksgiving. Well, it's not Thanksgiving in the US. So for my American clients, I let them know that I will not be in the office on Monday because it's Thanksgiving, and people fully understand that. So I hope that answers your question, Pauline. If you have anything else, please feel free to reach out again. And if you have a question you'd like me to answer on a future episode of the podcast, you can submit yours by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback, and I would love to answer it. So that's it for this episode. I want to remind you about Backblaze, the resource of the week. If you're not already using something to back up your system, then please consider Backblaze, resourcefuldesigner.com/backblaze, where you can sign up and protect yourself in case your system ever gets stolen or damaged. You never know when there's a natural disaster or something occurs and you lose everything, your physical equipment. And it's just peace of mind knowing that this cloud backup is there for you. And it's so much more than Dropbox or Google Drive and that sort of thing. And if you're curious about the Resourceful Designer community, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community, where you can sign up. I'd love to see you in the group. So that's it for me this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I always appreciate the time that you take to listen and to learn as you grow your design business. So until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.